Hey again, CK. This is Brent, and I'm making omelets today. Now, what is an omelet? It's basically a disc of egg that has some cheese in the middle, and it's folded over in half. So just think of almost like an egg tortilla with cheese in the middle and then folded over. And the nice thing about it is, in terms of software, all you need are eggs, cheese, butter, salt, and pepper. So, as long as you have eggs and cheese around, which most folks do, you can make an omelet. And there's a little bit of being careful with making it. Nothing too hard. It's not like you'll kill yourself. But it does require a little bit of finesse, which is what this video is all about. Excuse me. So the hardware I've set up on my range here is just a simple small pan. And I've got the range on about 40%. And I've already got my eggs here. Basically, for a single person, whoops, a little something dropped in there. For a single person omelet, you want about 3 eggs. For a 2-person omelet, you want 5 eggs. So it's basically 2 eggs per person plus 1 total. If you get up to 7 eggs, a 3-person omelet, that's about the max I'd go. And kind of you're limited by the pan size too. One sec. Yeah, icky. So I've got some butter in the pan, about a tablespoon. This is a 1-person omelet, so I'm only using 3 eggs. So the butter's in the pan on 40%. It's starting to melt. And actually, I'm probably going to push that up to about 50% just to get this really going. I've got my 3 eggs here. I'm going to mix these up because if they just went in straight like this, then we'd get cooked whites and cooked eggs separately, which is not good. And you're not looking to totally make this a perfectly combined set of eggs, but just close enough to where they're pretty well incorporated, and hopefully you can see that fairly well. I've also got some cheese. This happens to be mozzarella that I just happen to have sitting around. I grated it. You don't have to grate cheese. You can use freshly or pre-grated cheese. Although I find that when you actually grate cheese, it's better. I don't know why it's better than the pre-grated cheese in the store. I think because the pre-grated cheese in the store just isn't very good cheese. Anyway, so here's my pan. The egg is now, or the butter is now completely melted. And I'm just going to check the temperature on that. It's actually not very hot. So I'm going to raise the temperature again to about 60%. And let that go for a minute. Like I said, the main thing about omelets is making sure that you're cooking them just right. If you put eggs in and are constantly moving them around, you'll get scrambled eggs. They won't hold together into that disc. So basically what you're going to need to do is put this stuff in here and sort of stand back and let it cook for maybe a few moments and just sort of watch it and watch it cook. And then once the underside has sort of firmed up, you can kind of push it to one side and move the runny stuff on the top towards the bottom of the pan and let that cook and sort of do it that way. Ideally, what folks do in like professional restaurants is they will take that and basically they'll cook one side and then slide the runny stuff underneath that cook. That's ideal, but it's kind of hard to do here. So I've got that going. I'm going to put my eggs on. You can see it's not even sizzling, but that's fine. I can start to hear a little bit of sizzling. And I'm just going to let that go. I'm just going to let that sit there because it's not really doing anything. And that's fine because I want this to cook on the bottom. And like I said, you need about a tablespoon of butter per person, and 3 eggs for 1 person and 5 eggs for 2 people. But you want a bigger pan for a 2-person omelet, obviously. So this isn't really very hot, honestly, but it's kind of sitting there. And I'm going to bring this in a little bit so you can see. The egg there is just starting to firm up. And if I do this with it, you can see it's not really doing anything. It's still very wet. That's fine. I'm going to let that sit there for a bit. You can just start to hear it start to bubble. That's fine. This might not end up being the most effective omelet video because I think my pan wasn't hot enough to begin with, but it's fine. It's gonna work out okay. So, and this is actually really good because it shows the key here is to let it sit, let it cook. it can start off kind of cool and then get up. Now, I have not put on salt and pepper yet, which I'm going to do right now. Probably should have done that earlier, but that's okay. Bit of pepper, bit of salt, and I'm letting that sit. Then basically once this has cooked and firmed up, I'm going to sprinkle the cheese on and flip it over and kind of let it cook that way. One other thing about omelets, when you're cooking them, you want to make sure that that's starting to firm up nicely. You want to make sure you bring it off of the pan and onto the plate a little before it looks like it's done cooking, because when you remove something off the plate, it's still hot. It won't go down to room temperature immediately. You need some time to cool down. That means that it is cooking at that moment while it's cooling down. So, like the first few omelets I made, they were kind of browned around the edges, not very good. So, okay, here we go. It's starting to firm up, and you can see now this is starting to look a little bit more firm. And when I push the sides, they kind of come away, like turning into a pancake. What I want to do now, though, is get the wet stuff on the top. I want to get off of the top onto the bottom by swirling it around that way, get that way, and kind of get the bottom from being totally there we go. And I'm going to move that down here. It's not incredibly beautiful, but that's fine. And see, the key here is I'm keeping this together, and I'm trying not to move it around too much. So that's looking actually pretty good and pretty firm. And I like the fact that I'm able to move it around kind of like a pancake. So that's starting to firm up, and trying to look a bit right. Again, you got to be careful to not let it go so long that it's going to be totally cooked. So what I'm going to do now is put on my cheese. And, well, I don't know. There's a bit more of that runny stuff on the top that I'd like to get down to the bottom. I'm just going to sort of move it over. There we go. Just like Bob Ross. Just move it a little bit over. Happy little trees. Okay, so that's fine. So now I'm going to sprinkle on my cheese. And I'm going to sprinkle it on one half, because the other half is going to flip on over it. And this means I want to look at this and say, okay, which part's going to be easier to flip over? I want kind of the lighter part on the top. So I'm looking at that big thick bottom, and I'm going to put the cheese on the thicker side of the omelet. Right like that. It's going to be great. And get just the rest of it there. You can have a lot of cheese or not too much. Now I'm going to flip this over by just moving it underneath there. And if you've done your job, it's going to be it's going to hold together pretty well. Now that kind of fell apart. That's fine. I don't care. You flip it over, and then I'm going to move it to the center so we can cook a little bit more. And you see, this kind of fell apart a bit, but that's fine. But it's now cooking, and it's smelling really good. Now the problem is, of course, the bottom is getting all the cooking, and the top isn't. So what I want to do right now is flip it. If I can. It's always a little dangerous. I'm going to move it like that, and then very carefully, very quickly, flip. There. Again, not the prettiest omelet ever, but it'll work quite well. And in fact, that's looking about right. I don't want to cook that too much longer. So I'll pop that out, put it on the plate. I'm done. I've got an omelet.